Look, I'm just going to come right out and say it, because I think we've all been dancing around it long enough. The Cleveland Browns have a quarterback situation on their hands right now, and it is not the polished, carefully managed, open competition narrative that the front office wants you to believe it is. I've been following this closely, really closely, and the more I dig into what's actually being said by the people who have real access to that building, the more clear it becomes that this thing has already been decided. Not officially, not publicly, but in the way that actually matters, in the conversations happening behind closed doors, in where the first-team reps are going, in the tone of every sourced report coming out of Cleveland right now. On one side, you have Deshaun Watson, 30 years old, coming off 2 Achilles ruptures, $230 million in fully guaranteed money, and 19 games played across 5 seasons in Cleveland. 19. And on the other side, you have Shedeur Sanders, a 5th-round rookie who made the Pro Bowl in 7 starts on a 5-12 team, who has his number back, who has a new coaching staff that clearly believes in him, and who has practically every credible analyst and insider in football quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, pointing toward him as the guy. I've gone through all of it. The insider reports, the analyst takes, the quotes from Browns legends, the financial reality of what Watson's contract means for this roster. And what I can tell you is this: the competition is real on paper, but the outcome already has a name attached to it. And that name is Shedeur Sanders. Let me set the scene for you, because the full picture of this situation is even more extraordinary than the headline suggests. You have a franchise that paid one quarterback $230 million in fully guaranteed money, the most catastrophically misallocated contract in the history of professional football. A quarterback who has been attached to this team for 5 years and has played in exactly 19 games. 19. Meanwhile, in walks a 5th-round rookie who nobody fully believed in, who spent half his debut season behind 3 other quarterbacks on the depth chart, who played through an injury, who absorbed the criticism, who waited patiently, and then went out and made the Pro Bowl. And now, every single credible voice around this team is quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, pointing toward the rookie as the guy, the starter, the face of this franchise, the one Cleveland has been waiting for. I want you to really sit with those numbers for a second because I think people gloss over them too quickly. Deshaun Watson, 5 years in Cleveland, 19 games played, a 33.1 total QBR, which, if you're not familiar, puts him at the absolute floor of NFL quarterback performance among qualified passers. He went 9-10 as a starter. He threw 19 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, and then, in what felt like the universe finally putting an exclamation point on one of the ugliest chapters in Browns history, he ruptured his Achilles in Week 7 of the 2024 season. And then, and this is almost incomprehensible when you say it out loud, he re-ruptured it during his own recovery process. He missed all of last season. He only just received medical clearance heading into the 2026 offseason program, 3 first-round picks, $230 million fully guaranteed, and 19 games to show for it. I've been following this league for a long time, and I genuinely cannot point to a more devastating roster construction failure in modern NFL history. That's not hyperbole, that's just the math. Now I want to talk about Shedeur Sanders, and I want to do it properly. Not with the kind of breathless hype that sometimes surrounds young players, but with the kind of honest, analytical respect that his situation actually deserves. Because the story of how he got here is the story of someone who was set up to fail at nearly every turn and refused to let that happen. He came into Cleveland as a 5th-round pick. Think about what that means. 5th round. That's the league telling you in the clearest possible terms that they don't see you as a foundational piece. That's not even a developmental pick. That's a late flyer, a project, a guy who might stick on a practice squad if things break right. And Cleveland didn't even give him a real chance to compete in the preseason because an oblique strain derailed his entire training camp before he could build any momentum or make any kind of impression on the new coaching staff. So he sat. He watched, he studied, he took mental reps, he did everything right without getting anything in return. And then November came around, and Cleveland's hand was forced by circumstances, and suddenly Shedeur Sanders was out there under center. 7 starts, over 1,400 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, on a team that finished 5-12, playing behind an offensive line that couldn't consistently protect him, without elite weapons on the outside to bail him out when plays broke down, and yes, 10 interceptions. I'm not going to pretend that number doesn't exist, because the people who wanted to dismiss him latched onto it immediately. But here's what I keep coming back to. A 5th-round pick in the most dysfunctional offensive environment imaginable, on a losing roster, still showed enough to get voted into the Pro Bowl, the first Cleveland Browns quarterback to earn that distinction since Derek Anderson in 2007. That's not luck. That's not circumstance. That's a player forcing the football world to take him seriously against every odds stacked against him. And now the landscape has completely shifted. He has his number back. Number 2, which carries its own symbolic weight in how this story is being told. He has Todd Monken, a new head coach who didn't arrive with any predetermined loyalty to Deshaun Watson, and who has made no secret of his genuine enthusiasm for what Shedeur brings to his system. And he has the momentum of a media and analyst community that has largely converged on the same conclusion. This job is Shedeur's to lose, and the only real drama left is how long it takes for Cleveland to make it official. The voices making this case aren't fringe commentators or casual takes from people who only watch highlights. These are connected insiders and established analysts whose opinions are shaped by actual information coming out of that building. Zach Jackson over at The Athletic. And if you follow Cleveland football closely, you know that Jackson is about as well-sourced an insider as this team has. Went on record saying he feels more strongly than ever that Sanders is the frontrunner. His language wasn't hedged or tentative. He said the job belongs to Sanders to lose, that handing him every available opportunity to compete is clearly the most sensible path forward, and that while there exists a theoretical world where Watson outplays him, he doesn't believe that world is the probable one. When Zach Jackson talks about what's happening inside the Browns organization, you listen, because he's not speculating, he's reporting. Then there's Tim Hasselbeck at ESPN, and this one really stopped me in my tracks when I heard it, because of where Hasselbeck was just a couple of months prior. Back in February, he sat on Get Up and said, clearly, and without any qualification, that there wasn't a single franchise in this league that should look at Shedeur Sanders and want to build their future around him. That was his public position, strong, confident, dismissive. And then in early April, he reversed course completely. He went on NFL Live and said, plainly, that he doesn't believe Deshaun Watson has a realistic shot at winning this competition. He walked through his reasoning methodically. Watson has been away from game action for too long. 2 Achilles injuries at his age present an enormous physical question mark. His standing within the locker room has been eroded by years of absence and disappointment, and the combination of those factors creates an insurmountable hill. And Shedeur Sanders, Hasselbeck said, finds himself in a genuinely remarkable position given everything that was working against him just a year ago. When the loudest public skeptic does a full reversal and starts picking you to win, that's not nothing. That's a significant signal about how this situation is being read around the league. Dan Graziano at ESPN has been pointing in the same direction, laying out the most likely sequence of events as Sanders entering the off-season program as the de facto starter and carrying that status all the way into the regular season, and his core argument keeps returning to the same inescapable reality. Nobody, not the coaches, not the front office, not the analysts, not anyone, knows what they're actually getting from Deshaun Watson in 2026. He has played 19 games in 5 years. You cannot build a season around that level of uncertainty. You cannot ask a fan base to invest emotionally in a quarterback whose availability and effectiveness are genuine mysteries. You cannot construct a competitive offense around a 30-year-old coming off 2 torn Achilles tendons who hasn't finished a game since 2023. That's not cruelty toward Watson. It's an honest reckoning with facts that the Browns can no longer afford to look past. But the voice that hit me hardest in all of this was Hanford Dixon. Because Dixon isn't a media personality operating from a distance. He's a Browns legend. He has roots in that organization that go deeper than any analyst covering the team from a press box. And he went on the Top Dog show and said what I think a lot of people inside and around the building have been feeling but not quite articulating with that level of directness. His words were unvarnished. Deshaun Watson hasn't done a single thing for this football team, and the front office needs to stop dancing around the obvious answer and tell Shedeur Sanders directly that the job is his, that he is QB1, that they believe in him. Dixon also went back to last season and talked about how damaging it was for Shedeur's development to watch Dillon Gabriel hold a higher position on the depth chart and take reps that rightfully should have been going to Sanders. He said flat out that he would hate to see that kind of mismanagement repeated. That's a man who loves this franchise expressing real frustration at what he sees as a front office that has been slow to embrace the obvious answer sitting right in front of them. Now, I want to be fair about the public posture Cleveland has taken because I don't think it's entirely cynical, even if it is obviously strategic. Todd Monken has declined to name a frontrunner. The team has presented this as an open competition. GM Andrew Berry stood at the Combine podium in February and said Watson would have to earn his starting spot. Owner Jimmy Haslam has talked about fresh starts and second chances and Watson's work ethic. And look, none of that is surprising, and none of it is necessarily dishonest in the strictest sense. You cannot publicly hand a starting job to one player before OTAs have even begun without creating real problems. You don't want Watson to tune out. You don't want the locker room to fracture along loyalty lines before training camp. You don't want to give anyone bulletin board material or create a distraction that overshadows the actual football you're trying to install. So you speak carefully, you keep it open, you talk about competition and opportunity and letting things play out. That's just organizational management, and I understand why they do it. But here's where I want to slow down and focus, because this is the part that reveals the real story beneath the official narrative, the OTA reps. In every quarterback competition, regardless of what a coaching staff says publicly, the distribution of first-team reps tells you everything. It tells you who the coaches trust. It tells you who the system is being built around. It tells you who actually has a shot and who is being kept around for depth and contingency. And everything leaking out of Cleveland right now, every piece of sourced reporting, every observation from people who have eyes on those sessions, all of it is pointing toward Shedeur Sanders receiving the lion's share of those first-team reps. Monken came out of the first quarterback session of the offseason program and said he was genuinely fired up about what he'd seen. He praised the room, and while he didn't single anyone out by name in that moment, the subtext of everything coming from that coaching staff is unmistakable. There is a head coach in Cleveland who is genuinely excited about Shedeur Sanders in his offensive system. Not about the competition, not about seeing how things develop, about Shedeur. And then there's the financial dimension to all of this, which adds a layer of dark, almost Shakespearean irony to the whole situation. Watson carries a $44.9 million cap hit in 2026. He is in the final year of his fully guaranteed deal. Cleveland cannot release him. They cannot trade him without absorbing a financial catastrophe that would compromise their roster flexibility for years. He is a fixture on their books, whether they want him there or not. And so the most realistic version of 2026 in Cleveland, the scenario that all the evidence points toward, is Watson collecting his enormous check and watching from the sideline as the quarterback he was brought to replace gets to do the job he was brought to do. Think about that for a moment. 3 first-round picks, $230 million guaranteed, and the most probable outcome is that he finishes his time with the Browns as a backup who never really got his footing. That is not just an organizational failure. It's the kind of cautionary tale that front offices around the league will be studying and referencing for decades. What I keep coming back to, though, what genuinely gives me something to be excited about amid all the dysfunction and financial wreckage, is the actual player Cleveland appears to have found in Shedeur Sanders. Because when I step back from all the contract drama and the organizational mismanagement and the media noise, I see a 24-year-old quarterback who has already demonstrated something that cannot be taught and cannot be manufactured: competitive resilience under pressure. He was drafted in the 5th round and treated like an afterthought. He couldn't get healthy in time to even compete in the preseason. He sat behind 3 quarterbacks who were all considered ahead of him on the depth chart. He stepped onto the field in November on a broken team with limited support around him and played well enough to earn Pro Bowl recognition. And now, through none of his own doing, he finds himself at the center of the most watched quarterback competition in the NFL heading into 2026. He is walking into training camp with momentum that money cannot buy. He has the number 2 on his back. He has a head coach who arrived in Cleveland without any obligation to any existing hierarchy, and who has made clear, between the lines, if not always explicitly, that he sees this young quarterback as someone worth building around. He has a fan base that is fully and energetically behind him in a way that Cleveland hasn't rallied around a quarterback in nearly 2 decades. And he has the analytical community, the insider community, and the legend community, all pointing toward the same conclusion about who runs this offense when the lights come on in September. The Browns don't have to create a story around their 2026 season. The story is already there, already written, already resonating with people who care about this franchise. Shedeur Sanders reclaiming number 2. A Pro Bowl selection in his back pocket. A coaching staff that believes in him. And a city that has been waiting for a reason to believe in its quarterback for longer than most can remember. All the front office has to do, the one thing they have been conspicuously reluctant to do, is stop pretending that the math is complicated. Stop dressing up the obvious in competition language and let the quarterback who earned the job go do the job. Every credible voice around this team is saying the same thing. The numbers are saying it. The trajectory is saying it. The reps are apparently going to say it loudly once OTAs get into full swing. Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns in 2026. Watson's chapter in Cleveland is written, and it is one of the most expensive, most disappointing chapters in the history of this franchise. The transition is happening. The only question that remains is exactly when the people making decisions in that building say what everyone else has already figured out. And based on everything I've been seeing, everything I've been reading, and everything I've been hearing from people who know this situation from the inside, that moment is coming very, very soon. Cleveland has a quarterback. His name is Shedeur Sanders, and the story that comes next is one I genuinely cannot wait to watch unfold.